Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Change by Choice, our newest episode. And today is a super special one because I'm doing another interview. I've got the beautiful and talented Kelty Gorski on with me right now. And I cannot wait to share or have her share her story with you guys so that you can see what a special human being she is. But more so, as always, with the interviews that I'm doing, it's how do people get to where they're at? You know, how do they overcome adversity? What, foundation do they come from in terms of, their mindset, how they grew up in their families, and what was it that really, propelled their growth? What did they lean on so that you guys who are listening in can take some tips and really see, are there any relatable pieces there that you can connect to? Because as always, sometimes when we get to this place where, we're seeing this person on social media, we're seeing them, in this certain level of success, however you want to define that, we don't always see what that person had to get through to get to where they're at and what it actually looks like behind that person that we see online. So this really is that platform where we're starting to highlight those struggles and just honor the journey, right? So welcome, Kim. Super excited to have you on.
Hello.
Awesome. Kim lives in Easton, Pennsylvania. So it's so nice. I was just saying on a live video how great it is that we can just connect like this virtually. Kim and I do a lot of work together. So it's great. We can live wherever we're at as long as there's Wi-Fi and we can always be connected. So it's great. So Kim is married to her husband, Steve. She's been with him, been married for 3.5 years. They've been together for 13 and they've got lots of fur babies, which I'm sure she'll drop something about her fur children in the podcast. She is a creator of Balance Over Perfect. She is a social mediaist. I always define her as creative genius because I work on multiple projects with her, and to be able to see how this girl's brain functions is it's phenomenal. I've learned so much along the way. She's creative director for Fitnesspreneurs Life, and she's a Beachbody coach. All right, so Kim, welcome.
Thanks for having me. And it's like so surreal to hear creative twice in there because you'll hear I was not a creative girl growing up at all. So it's very cool.
I love hearing stuff like that. So why don't we start all the way back? I like to start in on childhood. Paint us a picture of what you were like as a child, what it was like, growing up in your house, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
So thanks for having me. I'm excited to share this. And I have to be honest, I'm nervous. If you have ever seen me on any social media platforms or continue to follow there, I don't look like I'm nervous. But when I think about going back to the core of why I do what I do, it does stem from my childhood. And when I would try to remember things from my childhood, I was a typical case that I blacked out a lot of it. And it was because there was some trauma. And so when I think about me, I see pictures. There's this iconic picture of me where I have spaghetti all over my face and body, and I'm just smiling from ear to ear. I love spaghetti, and I love to just like be that happy person. So to see that when I was 5, it was like when I was 5 years old, like that's who I was. I on the outside, I was super happy. I was just this happy-go-lucky. I want to be your friend. If you're not my friend, I'm going to make you my friend because we're going to have the best time ever. But I grew up with 2 older brothers. And so I kind of had that hard nose, like, hey, I'm going to, I'm that tomboy type person. And just the biggest memory is that I had was that I was a big people pleaser. My parents divorced when I was 9, and it was very much a normal divorce in the sense that they just fought all the time. I remember as young as 6, 7 years old, knowing like I want them to separate, and now thinking into my 30s, like that's not very normal for a child to think that, but knowing that there wasn't happiness, there wasn't connection, there wasn't anything there, that it really was the turning point of where I became that people pleaser, that I wanted people to always be happy around me. And it actually started to stem into me not being happy myself because I was always concerned about others. So when I think back to childhood, it it saddens me at first because I always just wanted to make others happy, but then deep rooted, I wasn't. And so, like the pivoting point where I think back is when my dad left. And I remember he had a green minivan, and he was leaving our house for the last time. And there was no really discussion of us, of my parents getting divorced. And I remember it was my brother and I standing outside, and he drove by and he looked at us, he kissed us very hard, and that was it. And that's really kind of how the divorce went, and kind of the next 10 years of my life went. There was really no talking of emotions, feelings, or disconnection. And so I felt very confused growing up. Did I do this to my family? Was this the reason of that happening? And so there was definitely that happy girl started to become really angry as a child, and really resistant, but she always put her head down and just try to just do her best. But it definitely left a huge imprint.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. In terms of, that happy child, like that big smiling face, and I see the smiles, like your pictures with your smiles on social media, and I can see the child in you, you know what I mean? Like I can see probably what that looked like. Is it fair to say that oftentimes when you are smiling, that's not what you were feeling on the inside? And often, like, were you consciously choosing to kind of show something different than who you were?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't live into my truth until about 2-3 years ago. So as early as 9 years old to about 28 years old. So close to 2 decades, maybe a little bit to the 2 decades. I forced it. I forced to smile a lot because I was living in a lot of pain. I think when you come from a divorced family, that was becoming the norm back then. But you still do feel alone, and especially when you're one of your parents. So my mother was very much against really that really having my dad see me, and so you very much find yourself confused. And then to make all matters worse, I was living in more pain than I even let anyone else to know. A story that I actually have never shared is that I was touched very wrongly by a family member. And so to compound effect, your parents getting divorced, which nowadays you can think is a norm, to no talk about emotions, to having someone touch you in a very wrong way, and voicing that to family members and still no one listening, I found myself very mute with my emotions. I found myself only smiling to be that people pleaser, because I thought there's no way I can please myself because no one will listen to me. I have too much pain. And I quickly went into that victim role very quickly as a child, and not really understanding it until an adult. But that smile was there for everyone else. That smile was not there for me. It protected me because I knew that I felt that people weren't going to listen to my feelings or my pain, because over the years, it became normal. And I became to justify it. Well, that's just how things go in life. And that's just how it's going to be. No one's going to listen to me with really what happened in my life and the hardships. And it really boiled down to is that I felt that was normal, and that's just a way of life.
Wow. Obviously I'm a mother, so hearing you go through your story, obviously it's not the first time I've heard that piece from you, but it hits my heart every single time. I can't imagine what you went through, you know what I mean? But what excites me through this process is that I know you now, do you know what I mean? And think of all the people who go through what they go through, who feel like no one's listening to them, that nobody knows what they're going through, that they're alone in the process. It's great to see that you'll be able to share a few things that you've done, you know what I mean, that you've held yourself accountable to get to the place where you are living in your true self now. And so it's, you're going to be such a blessing to so many people, which is that part's exciting.
And I appreciate that. And, I think just to show what that does to someone is what's interesting about the whole thing, and we'll share the gratitude piece later, I know down the road, is when you have something traumatic happen to you in your life, and no one wants to acknowledge it or listen to it, you start to really look at yourself, because the only person you can look at, and say, well, because you're so young too, it's like, well, you made that up. Or you go through these stages of sadness and grief and uncertainty. And so most of my life, I thought I was a liar. And it made me very insecure around people, because I said, well, do I mean that? Or am I being true? And all these things came up for me. And so my self-limiting beliefs were really, really strong. And it didn't help that I was living in a household that fueled those self-limiting beliefs of, you are not enough, you aren't smart enough, you're not worthy of this life outside of just dying and paying taxes. That was how I was brought up from the early ages of 8 to 28. And so, it was just a big compound effect of everything. And I always have said this. I said, I'm so appreciative now, but if someone just would have acknowledged it, it wouldn't have been as bad. Mm-hmm. And that's the unfortunate thing for both sides. I wasn't the only one that was hurt in the process. And so that's the hardest thing, where when you try to heal, people just want to be heard. I think that's a normal quality for anyone in life, but especially as a child, you're looking for those people to protect you, and you're not.
So, bringing you into maybe your high school, I would say career or whatever, but you obviously were amazing with soccer. So I want you to just kind of stem into that competitive kind of aspect of your life.
Yeah.
And also, so now you're this teenager who is coming from certain scenarios. You've got these self-limiting beliefs, you're trying to be positive on the outside, but underneath, obviously there's, use the word, you were feeling a lot like a victim. And that's something that kind of has really connected into your journey, into your future self. How were you with your friends? How were you how did that smiley Kim and the other Kim, do you know what I mean? How did they the opposing people show up, I guess?
Yeah, in high school, it's hard for my friends to hear this piece about me, because they said I had no idea. And because I was very good. I was very good at hiding it. I was very good at making everyone laugh. I mean, because it was it set me free. It's when you need that peace. What was it for me? It was just to make people laugh. And so, I would have my moments, and it was always associated with food. People would say oh, don't let Kim go without food, because she's just going to lash out. And it was true. I would be a completely different person. I was for sure one high to the other low. But when we would connect, in high school, I was just always that overachiever. And so the reason why I overachieved is because I wanted to be seen and I wanted to be heard, and I wasn't being seen and heard by someone that I wanted that. And that was from my mom. I really wanted her to accept me. Now going down the road, I didn't accept me. So she really standed no chance, really. So because I needed to accept myself first before anyone else was going to do it. And so, I ended up in college being an All-American, soccer player. I ended up, having all these accolades. But at the end of the day, I still found myself unfulfilled, unhappy, still uncertain with what I wanted, because I felt I was doing everything for everyone else. Meaning I was playing soccer so I could get a scholarship, so my parents didn't have to pay a lot for me to go to college. I was, the life of the party, because people really enjoyed that piece to me. And so it was a struggle to really live that out in high school and in college, because everyone, I believe at that age, really wants to become accepted. That's common. I just took it to an extreme. I took it to the extreme that I graduated over 800 kids, and I was one of the most popular girls, because I wanted to be able to be that person for someone. But little did I know I needed to be that person for me.
Mm. So what else in terms of that your past, how did it connect to other behaviors? So now you're moving into like your 20s. What other kind of like behaviors did you see starting to come up that weren't leading you to being your best self, that were starting to become problematic for you?
Yeah, that's where, when I say that as a tagline, I'd say to, with my brand is, I was an extreme pessimist to now obnoxious optimist, because it's the best way I can describe who I was in my early 20s. And that's where everyone was very confused when I would talk about this. But the only person that really did see it truly was my now husband, Steve. So I would have moments of, and alcohol was always involved. Alcohol was involved where these demons came out. And these demons came in the forms of projecting. So I would project my anger onto my husband. Sometimes my friends would see it, but very rare. And it would just come to the point where I was pinpointing, pointing fingers at him, but really I was just so unhappy with the way my life was going, because I was in careers that I was just getting treated not so great. And frankly, it wasn't their fault. I let them do it. I let them overwork me. I let them underpay me because I didn't know my worth. And so a snapshot of it is I was 24 years old. I was another birthday. I'm actually coming up on my 31st birthday. So it's very vivid in my mind, because it was my turning point to really understand that these demons weren't going to go away unless I faced them. And so I was leaving the night after a night of drinking, and one thing led to another. My husband maybe said nothing, and I just went crazy, to the point where, if you know me, you would never think words and anger and hatred would come out the way they did. And I remember calling my brother and saying, I think I'm an alcoholic. And he was like, you're not an alcoholic. And I was like, no, I am. This is what happens when I drink. This is what happens, everything like this. And he said, you have demons. And I wasn't dealing with my past. I wasn't dealing with the family member that touched me in the wrong way. I wasn't dealing with the resentment I had towards family members for not listening. I wasn't dealing with the mental abuse that I never even talked about until a few years ago. I had no idea that I was being mentally abused on a regular basis, and because it was normal. That's my environment. And so when I think about being 24 in that bar, being pretty much taken out because I was yelling so much at my then boyfriend, now husband, it was my rock bottom, because I was either going to seek help or I was going to continue down that road. And there really was no other alternative. The smiley girl was not going to cut it for the times that those blow ups were happening.
So that was your changing point.
That was my changing point 7 years ago.
Awesome. Wow. And you made a decision that next day. And I'm sure it hasn't been this super straight line. Do you know what I mean? Obviously, you make this choice and poof.
Yeah. Oh my God, it was perfect. It was perfect after that.
Yeah.
I had like butterflies around me every day. It was amazing. No.
I always say it's like, when you make the commitment to start moving forward, it doesn't always feel good, right? There are moments that feel really like not good, but you made a commitment to yourself first and foremost. So let's start to talk about, what did that commitment to yourself, what did that lead into you having to do? And what changes did you start to make? So start to lead us, beyond 24.
So therapy was a for sure. I didn't really understand anything else. And what's interesting about now, so 7 years later, so current day, I personally think therapy is common nature. It's talked about more, but I came from a family where that's not where you go. They're considered psychiatrists, and, kind of like the loony bin, or so to speak. And I just knew I needed to, for 1 second, think about, what do I need? And I need help. And there was no one really, I believe, that I could turn to in my family for this help, because it was just, I had so much resentment towards very many people. And so I knew I needed to go seek help. And so I started going to therapy once a week. I could not afford therapy once a week. My insurance did not cover it. It was $75 a week. And I was making $30,000 and doing a 3-hour round trip commutes. And I was not getting gas paid for. So when people tell me that they can't afford to take care of themselves, that's where I go. I was making $30,000 a year. I was living out on my own with my husband my boyfriend, who was making okay money, definitely not crazy at the time. And I paid $75 a week to go seek therapy. It just was one of those things where I had to go. I got so comfortable in the moment, even though it was very uncomfortable. It was my safe place, because when you have things that are traumatic like that, when you grow up, you don't feel safe. You don't feel safe in really any environment. And I found my safe place. And I will say this, I'm grateful that I found it right away. Her name was Toshi. The name of itself was amazing. She was amazing. And I thank her for even getting that Band-Aid off. But I also have to thank my then boyfriend too. Steve, my husband, he knew there was something more in me. He knew that I needed to go past there. So from 24 to 28, I did therapy. That's all I knew. And then I started to see a little bit more of my self-worth in jobs. I said, I want to go to corporate. I want to be in a corporate event planner, because I used to do event planning and catering. It was right around the corner, so I wasn't doing that 3-hour round trip commute. And I was trying to find that structure, but I was still searching for something that I couldn't find in myself. I was trying to find this fulfillment in this career, but I wasn't still chipping away at me and at my relationships with my husband, my then boyfriend, now husband. And so I started to work out. That was a big thing. I was a college athlete, like you mentioned before. I was an All-American, Rookie of the Year. I had the most assists in my school, I think still. But I just stopped afterwards because it was a team sport, and you think like that's all you got. That's your team. And I just stopped. And I really realized, especially when I was doing the corporate event planning, because I was around even more negative people and a structured environment that this creative brain can't be in. And so I started working out. It was the only thing I knew to release it. I started running. I started doing just like body weight exercises. And that's what started to really get the framework down. So therapy plus workout, but it still wasn't, it was just, I was kind of like a snail at that point. So for like 24 to 28, I felt like I was just snailing away. And when I turned 28, my husband was working, we were married by then. My husband was working as a substitute teacher. He went back to school for teaching, but in Pennsylvania, teaching is very, very hard to get a job, still is. And so he was substitute teaching, not getting many hours. He was bartending, and he was a soccer coach. And I knew I needed to make more money. I was making okay money as a corporate event planner. And then I ended up going to another place where I was running an event planning company. But I wanted him to stop. I felt like, okay, we need to get our relationship better. We don't see each other. So I wanted him to stop, working that bartending job. And that's where I came along to Beachbody. And Beachbody is one of those things where, especially if you're not like used to network marketing, you're like, oh gosh, what is that? I look at Beachbody as it went from going from a snail to like a hare. Was it the snail and the hare? Is that what it is? Yeah. By the way, first time I ever said that. But isn't that the story? Like, oh wait, isn't it the snail and the hare? Okay. Right? I think so. I'm really bad at those. You'll learn that quickly. But I started going from, I'm chipping away. I felt like, that image where you say, where it's like someone in like the gold mine that's chipping, and then they give up, but just that little bit more, they'll hit the gold mine. That's what I was doing for so long. I was chipping and chipping away. And then I finally found my gold mine. And the gold mine came in the form of people. People that actually believed in me and trusted me to live this amazing life. And because I came in with such trust issues, I was like, no way this is going to last. No way. And it just started to just compound because I was looking for a life coach at that time. And it came in the form of Beachbody. So it came in the form of me helping people with health and fitness, which I was already doing for my own self. But it also helped me a ton in my mindset, because when I think about the people that came into my life at that point 3 years ago, oh my gosh, I would still be snailing away. I really would, because I didn't have the resources. I didn't have the tools to really fully change my mindset. And it's not that my therapist was not great. She was fantastic, but I was still wallowing in my own sorrows outside of that. You know, by Jim Rohn, an amazing mentor, he says, you are a reflection of the 5 closest people to you. When I first learned that with a lot of my mentoring, I just was blown away by that, because I was sitting in a room at my last job in event planning, and it was 5 people that I worked with 85% of my waking moments. And it's not like they were bad people. It's just that they did not want to push past this mindset. They did not want to believe in other people. They were only so concerned in their own selves. And so I really attest that people pleaser in me was able to push past that uncomfortableness of growing more internally to be able to please more people. Because I knew I was getting to a point in my life that I was just hitting a wall, and things weren't drastically changing. And like we've talked about, like nothing's going to happen overnight. That took, 4 years for me to even get to another point in the junction, in the journey. But it was one of those things where I just had to say, okay, I'm going to trust this, even though I still have a ton of trust issues. I'm going to trust this process because I still need to break through a lot of barriers. And so, yeah, 4 years later.
4 years later. So what would you say? So from that time when you started 3 years ago, and you said, okay, even though I've got these trust issues, I'm going to consciously, trust this process and move forward. So what have you seen in terms of your growth in the last 3 years now that have led you to this point right now?
The big thing is what I talked about in the beginning, the creative person. I'm now considered someone people would like to go to for creativity. So I came into this industry, I came into the last 3 years of my life as still, Kim, you're just a really smiley, happy girl that's pretty. And so I defined myself as that. And so it only allowed me, with that mindset, it only allowed me to work hard, meaning 15 plus hour days, going back to a 3-hour round trip commute, because I felt that was my only connections, and really using my muscles, not using my brain, using my muscles, because in the event planning world, it is so funny because people always think of Jennifer Lopez from The Wedding Planner, and it's not like that. It's not glamorous like that at all. And I will say, I love the industry. I think it's amazing. But it just wasn't a fit for me with working that kind of grueling, because I only valued myself then as you can work really, really, really hard, Kim, and you can outwork pretty much anyone hour-wise. But guess what? You're going to be at the expense. And so is your family. And so is your lifestyle. I had no freedom, none whatsoever. And so throughout the last 3 years, I went through a course, which Charlotte has probably talked about before, because she's a high performance coach. I went through a course within Beachbody that another coach of ours and mentor, Vito Lofato, ran, and it was called 4.0 High Performance. And it was just another less training that we had available, which again, I'm like blown away by, because I was looking for life coaches, and this trainings were for free. It was insanity to me. And I went through the training, and I remember distinctly, it was week 7. We were on a call, and we were talking about the tenets of psychology. And even though I was going through a lot of mindset, I was reading some great personal development books and quotes. I was a huge Pinterest buff then, in the sense that I felt that was my therapy. Go to Pinterest, and yes, I'm going to believe in myself after that quote. And this really dug deep, the week 7. And week 7 was where I finally was able to realize that I was being mentally abused. And it was so top of mind and so in the moment, because I remember it was a 4th of July. I was so dedicated to my growth then, because There was no other way in my mind. And it was weeks, I was in the car, and it was a 4th of July party, and I was with my my husband and friends and everything. And I said, hey, I got an hour call. I'm going to go, and I'll be right back. Well, it wasn't that easy, because I remember it was another argument with my mom, and she was calling me while I was on this call. And this call was so in depth with, really standing up to those people, really understanding who those people in your life that have been beating you down. And I had it blaring in my ear, call after call, missed voicemail after missed voicemail. And I remember opening up on the call and saying, in tears, I can't move past my mom. I can't move past, the way that she wants me to feel and think and do and be. And I always thought it was just me being a whiny 17-year-old. And, at the time I was 28, 29. And that's where, in that moment, and when I've been surrounded by so many people for so long that really truly want to lift you up and be there for you, and not just be there because it's a business opportunity, because it's a life opportunity. And I got off that call and I called her, and I let her know that there were very many times in our life that it was hard for me to be around her, to do this. And what really told me what I was dealing with was when I said this. I said, Mom, I have told you that I was suicidal, and you didn't say anything. And she did it again. She was screaming, she was yelling, she only wanted to be heard. And I said, Mom, you did it again. When your daughter tells you that she's suicidal and you don't say anything, how do you feel that she's going to react? I can't have a relationship with you right now. Not like this. And the unfortunate thing with it was she did her best. And so I felt for her, and now I do for 100%. But when you get to a point where it's so turmoil and it's so negative and it's just very detrimental for your well-being, there is no other choice, because you have to get into an environment where you feel safe. And I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel safe knowing that she was going to call, and I didn't know what I was getting. I didn't feel safe in her, in her presence, because, when you open up like that to a mother, you think you're going to have some remorse, and you don't. That's where you have to make the switch. And so that day I made the switch. And then shortly after, about a few months later, is when I finally said, you seek help this time, or we can't have a relationship. And so that piece right there was my big breakthrough. And it's like, there's so many breakthroughs, and it's not one specific one, but that was one where I said, oh, I just stand up to a person that I just sat in therapy almost 6 years ago and said I would never stand up to her. And I just did. And that's where I felt that I didn't have the shackles, and someone that I love, I love her, have any control over me, because there was no financial control anymore. And now there was no emotional control anymore. And so that was big. And so now 3 years later, I sit here and I want to rebuild my relationship with her. And we are in that process, but it's still very hard, because there was so much time passed and so much things going on. But I find myself with a lot of peace with my decisions, opposed to always double guessing everything, because there's more to life than that. There's more to life than living in the past. And where I find my biggest growth is the gratitude. I can't even begin to say how grateful I am for everything that's happened in my life, because I don't believe I'd be as passionate to help other women. I don't believe I'd be as patient to help other women find the peace in the highs and the lows, like the true definition of balance. And that's really where it came full circle for me, and really be able to do that piece of relatedness, because that's what people want to do. They want to be heard. And I'm able to bring that to them with my experience.
That's amazing. I love hearing the gratitude, and I see it in you, so it's amazing to kind of have you verbalize that, because a lot of times, I hear people wanting to dismiss, what they've been through. And those pieces are really the fire that helps us create the life that we want moving forward if you use it in the right way, right? So you obviously did a lot of the work to kind of build yourself up, and you were 100% committed to yourself, and now you are really starting to kind of come into your own, and now have created this amazing brand, right? Being fueled exactly from that, what your passion is, what your mission is. What would you say to young Kim now?
Oh, young Kim.
Words of advice?
You're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Because she was always worried. Yeah, she was so cute. And I hope to God I have a little girl just like her, because I can't wait to say those things to her, because I know she'll be okay and you'll do your best. And I want you to go through struggles. Those struggles is what makes you so strong. I always say this to my husband, because we both come from kind of hard backgrounds, and everyone does, I believe. And I always say, I hope they have the same drive as us. I'm going to love them too much, but
they have no drive.
yeah, they're going to be just hanging out, just like bonbons. And but it's just, I want them to go through life stuff like this. And it's just, and that's where, I have so much gratitude towards my mom, because she did do her best and she did break the cycle the best way that she knew how to. I'm just being a lot more dramatic about it and a lot more strategic in the sense that, I'm going to go now help women. It's not going to just be me. It's not stopping at just me. Thank God for my family, it's stopping at me, but not for other women. So
awesome. So last piece. So in terms of now, from what I gathered from what you talked about at the beginning, did you see yourself as somebody that was going to get a lot of success in life? Like, honestly, truly. And now, how do you see that?
I did. And that's probably not the right answer. And I think and there's definitely not a right or wrong answer, but I always, and I kid about this with my husband, I'm like, I have a sixth sense. And everyone that's listening, they're like, crazy, let's turn her off. But I've always had this underlying gut feeling that it was going to make sense one day. And I say that all the time with anything I do now, especially with, starting up my own brand and being able to get on different type of like platforms that way. I still always say it will make sense one day, Kim, and it will make sense. And I just kept on saying that to myself, even when I was in therapy for my own self, even when I was in therapy for my marriage, I always felt it was going to just work out. And it's funny about success, because even when you're in that, oh my God, look at her, she's doing amazing things, it's awesome, it's still hard. And so I think that's a question you got to ask yourself. If you really truly want success, what does that look like for you? And mine always looks like a ton of connection, being able to have more freedom than I've ever had before, because I didn't have that freedom with working 15 plus hour days, 3-hour round trip commute. And so it's like the freedom of that time. And now it's the freedom of the purpose, and so when I think about, I didn't have those then, but I knew something was going to make sense, because my story about me being a caterer and getting paid less than the people that were doing the dishes was going to make sense one day, because I was putting in so many hours. And, and by no means, no knocking on those people, because they really helped me a ton. But I liked, being able to see that piece of me working, in the background, to be able to be in quote unquote a spotlight is fantastic, because I knew it was going to make sense. And I think if you have that underlining, something's not right, or something needs to be more, you will too. And you see it all the time. And I don't know how many more times we all have to see it, but I have to be reminded too, is you see all these creators of Apple what's the Uber, and you talk about these, it's not overnight success, and you see them working out of their garages, and it's like, that's the beauty of it. And I even with creating my brand and doing some things in the beginning, I'm like, this is so cool. I'm going to be so upset when I'm not doing these really hard things later on in life when it's super big. Because it's just, when you think about it in that way and really enjoy the journey, really understand and enjoy the journey, you will be successful. And it's always measured off what you think success is.
Yeah. Well, you gave us so much information, and I'm really excited for you. You obviously, you really just like launched your brand, Balance Over Perfect. You're going to help a ton of women out there. You're probably one of the most authentic and open and vulnerable and real people I've met. So I'm blessed to have you in my life. And any last closing words?
For sure. Because with the openness and the vulnerability, if a piece of my story touches you, please just reach out, because justifying whatever happened in your life over the years is going to continue to be in that seclusion. You know, you're secluded, you're alone. And me being vulnerable doesn't come from a place of, oh my gosh, I'm super comfortable with this. I want to share in all my dirty laundry. Me being vulnerable is because I know every time I do it, someone will open up about it. And that's where I find my courage and my confidence in it, because it's never easy, ever. And Charlotte can attest to that. So I just hope someone on the other end is thinking, okay, I can confront that person now, or I can set myself free because this is my truest self. This is who I want to be. And so that's my final thought.
Yay. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Kim. And we will have all the information for where you can find Kim in the post that's going to be connected to this. But anywho, I'm so excited to continue to share the journey of people, and every story matters. And that's why I made that the hashtag for this specific type of podcast. It's, everything in life is a choice. And just by Kim's story, you can see that it was a series of choices that she made that brought her to this place now. And, honoring your journey, honoring the struggle, giving yourself grace in the process, they're all key elements to getting to that place where you feel peaceful and you feel authentic and you feel true. And so thank you again for sharing your story. And I hope everybody has an amazing day. All right.
Thanks, guys.